to Constitutional and Administrative Law 2 once again. Now, for this particular short video, what I intend to do is to introduce you to the concepts that you will be learning in the first lecture or the first topic under Constitutional and Administrative Law 2, right? So the first topic is on the UK electoral system, and this is actually a follow-through to what you have learned under Constitutional and Administrative Law 1. Simply because we are still looking at the constitutional law part of the modules rather than the administrative law component. So in the last semester, you would have learned the various constitutional law concepts. You would have learned quite a bit on general human rights laws for the UK. You have learned the basic things that you need to know, the basic principles, the basic theories, the basic concepts. So now what we are doing is we are moving on to a particular system, and that would be the electoral system, right? And this is part of constitutional law, still, if you think about it, rather than administrative law. So this is the final leg of your constitutional law before we move on to UK administrative law. So what will you be learning in this particular topic, through this topic? You will understand this concept known as universal adult suffrage. Okay, this is something you may not have heard of. Later we'll look at some of the different terminology that you'll be coming across through the lectures, through the face-to-face lectures. And so you'll be able to appreciate, you'll be able to explain, you'll be able to advocate in relation to universal adult suffrage. You will also understand what it is, what does it take, for a person to be able to vote. In fact, you will also learn what it takes for a person to be able to stand for elections as well. Okay? And finally, we'll explain in our face-to-face lectures, we will explain to you the various electoral systems that there are in the world. There are very many diverse systems. What you understand is basically just one system, the simple majoritarian system it's called, or the first past the post system that we use in Malaysia. You probably understand it because maybe you haven't voted, but you would have heard about it, the mechanics of it on TV, through media, through friends and through family who have already voted. So you already know how that works. But you may not have realized that there could be other ways of voting as well. Okay? So we'll be looking at the various systems that are employed around the world and whether these systems are better than what you have in Malaysia or in the UK. Specifically for the UK at this point, because we are still looking at UK constitutional law, we've not moved on to Malaysian constitutional law just yet, right? So in this introduction to this particular topic, I would like you to have a look at these various words or terminology that we'll be using on elections or the election process. Okay, words like campaigns, adult suffrage, this you have heard already from the earlier slide. Constituencies, what are constituencies? First past the post system, again this was mentioned in the earlier slide. Alternative vote system, supplementary vote system, single transferable vote system. Constituency, again, ironically, full franchise. Okay, some of the words which are important. So have a look at them, reflect on them for this particular video. Just have a look at them and think about
Hello dear students. Now this will be the first lecture on the historical background to the Malaysian legal system. To start off, I would like to go through the objectives of this lecture. By the end of the lecture, students will be able to understand the background of the Malaysian history, appreciate the development of the Malacca Sultanate, and understand the arrival of colonial powers into Malaya and the influence to the legal system of Malaysia. Now, the lecture outline, we will start off by looking at the pre-colonial history of Malaya, followed by the Malacca Sultanate. Subsequently, we are going to look at the colonization of Malaya by various foreign powers, mainly Portuguese and Dutch. And lastly, we are going to look at the British influence in Malaya. Now, when we look at the pre-colonial legal history of Malaysia, you will find that there were no records of any legal system in place. So Malaya was inhabited by the ancestors of Negritos and Senoi. Okay, we call them Orang Asli or Orang Asal, the Proto-Malays from South China, and the Jute-Malays from Yunnan in southwest China. So we know that there were settlements, okay, amongst these people, but as far as a legal system is not known. There are no records to show that there was a legal system in place. So when we look at the pre-colonial legal history, you can see that from the beginning of the 1st to the 13th century, there was a lot of migration from India, from Indochina, okay, which resulted in the establishment of several Hindu and Buddhist kingdoms in Indochina. Okay, so you find, okay, there were a lot of migration around this area, okay, which is Indochina, all these places. So there was a Buddhist kingdom in Sumatra of Sriwijaya, and you have Java at the bottom here. Okay, there was a Javanese kingdom of Majapahit, okay, in this area here, Javanese. Okay, so the early development of the Malaysian legal system is actually the Malacca Sultanate. We will see the Malacca Sultanate shortly. Okay, so when we look at the Malacca Sultanate, okay, so that is Malacca here, all right, this period is considered the early landmark in the development of the Malaysian legal system. Okay, the Malacca Sultanate has got great influence in regards to the historical development of the Malaysian legal system. So let's look at the history of the Malacca Sultanate. I'm sure some of you would have done history in your secondary school, all right? So this will be some sort of a revision. Now, Malacca is said to be founded by Parameswara, a prince who descended from Palembang. So you can see there's a small place. This is the island of Sumatra, and Palembang is around here. So rumors has it that it was founded by Parameswara, who happens to be a prince who descended from Palembang. Now, in 1391, the kingdom of Srivijaya was attacked by the Majapahit kingdom. So you find it's Majapahit here. Okay, and as a result, Parameswara fled to Temasek, which is the old name for Singapore. Okay, so he went to Singapore, which is Temasek, which was at that point of time, okay, ruled by someone known as Temagi. So he went to seek asylum in Temasek. So let's see what happened thereafter. Okay, from Temasek, Parameswara then took refuge in Malacca and established the Malacca Sultanate. Subsequently, he converted to Islam, okay, and he took the name of Sultan Iskandar Shah. So the legal system continued to exhibit the richness and diversity of various traditions that was in place. You have the Malay Adat. As I told you earlier, there was a lot of migration. So you have Hindu and Buddhist feudal tradition, and also Islamic tenets were all present at that point of time in Malacca. Now, by the time the Portuguese, that is the first foreign power, okay, that came to Malaya, and namely came to Malacca, 1511, Islam had become the identifying feature of Malay society in Malacca. So because of the location of Malacca, it flourished as a port. Okay, so you find there were a lot of traders from India, from Arab, okay, who came to Malacca to trade. And at the same time, apart from trading, Islam also spread, and it became the law of the land, and it was also applied alongside the Malay customary laws, which is also known as adat. So you find that there was an administrative structure that was put in place by the Malacca Sultanate at that point of time. So this a little chart here shows the hierarchy of the administrative structure that was present under the Malacca Sultanate. Of course, the king, the Sultan, was the ruler, and below the Sultan you have the Bendahara. Okay, you look at Bendahara is someone akin to like a prime minister, okay, or a chief minister. So he's in charge of the political and judicial matters in Malacca. Then you have someone known as Temenggung, okay, who is akin to the police. So someone who keeps law and order, okay, apprehending criminals, maintaining the peace, okay. So that was Temenggung. Then you have someone known as the Shah Bandar, okay, who is the harbor master, because Malacca is a port, okay, and it's a very busy port and it was doing very well. So you needed someone to oversee the port. So you have a Shah Bandar in charge of traders and also collection of taxes. You have the Laksamana, who is the admiral of the fleet, and you have someone called Penghulu Bendahari, who is a treasurer or assistant to the Bendahara. Okay, so you find that there was some kind of administrative structure during the Malacca Sultanate. Now, a remarkable development, okay, during the reign of one of the Malacca Sultans, Sultan Muzaffar Shah, who reigned from 1444 to 1456, okay, was the compilation of something known as Hukum Kanun. All right, so this Hukum Kanun provided uniformity as far as justice is concerned. And subsequently, between the 15th to 19th century, various digests and codes were compiled. Now, two formal texts of Old Malacca, which you can still see till today. You have Hukum Kanun Malacca, which is in relation to laws of the land. A lot of it covers civil and criminal matters. And you also have the Undang-Undang Laut Malacca, which is the maritime laws in relation to rules and regulations, okay, at sea. Because as you know, Malacca is a port, so you needed some kind of rules and regulations. Some aspects of Islamic law can also be found, okay, in relation to marriage, divorce, as well as property claims. Besides that, the Malay customary practices can also be found. Okay, there are two adat, tradition in other words, okay, which is known as adat Temenggung, which favors the patriarchal Malay customary law, and you also have the adat Perpate that favors the matrilineal Malay customary laws, and it originated from Sumatra and it's observed, okay, in Negeri Sembilan till today. So this is in relation to Malay customary practices. But it's also noteworthy that, you have Chinese and Indian migrants as well. Okay, so they also brought in their own customs and traditions, and they have their own headmen to settle disputes. So as far as Chinese is concerned, okay, they have someone called the Kapala or headman who settle disputes among themselves. Okay, they have their own codes in relation to commercial matters, and the Chinese affair officers were appointed, okay, to regulate, okay, basically Chinese customs and laws. Now the Indians too, you have a Malayan controller of labor who takes care of the Indian affairs, okay, and Indians were mostly laborers in rubber plantations, and also they took up some posts in the public service. So you'll see that, in Malacca at that point of time, okay, there had various ethnicity, various religion, okay, and you have freedom to a certain extent to practice your own customs and traditions. Although Islam, to a great extent, is okay practiced quite widely, but other customs and religions like the Chinese and Indians could also practice their own religion at the same time. So the first foreign power that came to Malacca is the Portuguese. And Portuguese came to Malacca in 1511, and it was captured by Alfonso de Albuquerque. So during the reign of Portuguese, you find that magistrates were appointed to settle civil and criminal cases. Islamic law and Malay customary laws were practiced alongside Portuguese laws. Now, Portuguese at that point of time, they tried to spread Christianity. They had a strong hold on Christianity, and they tried to spread the religion among the various communities. Now, as a result, there was a rise of conflict, which subsequently brought the downfall of the Portuguese. Now, after the Portuguese, in 1641, the Dutch East India Company and local allies pushed the Portuguese from Malacca. So under the rule of Stephen van der Hagen. So Dutch law was applied alongside Islamic law and Malay customary laws. Now, as far as the Dutch is concerned, they were more concerned with the trade, and they did not interfere with the Islamic laws and Malay customary laws. Right? So hence, it did not affect the Malacca Sultanate. Now, the third superpower is British. They were the longest to rule Malaya, from 1786 to 1941. Subsequently, you have the Japanese occupation. So we had Japanese occupation for a short while, and subsequently British came back after the Japanese occupation and ruled right up to independence. When we got independence in 1957. So it's almost 150 years. So they were the longest colonial power that colonized Malaya. So this period of British rule can be said as a period, considered a landmark period of the Malaysian legal history, right? And during the British rule, there were three major stages in regards to British intervention of Malaya. Firstly, the first stage is the Strait Settlement. The second stage is the Malay states, and the third stage will be the East Malaysia. So you find that there are three stages that we are going to look at, and these three stages are crucial in understanding the development of the colonial power of British in ruling Malaya. So the Strait Settlement was created when British introduced the Strait Settlement existed when British spread their powers to Penang, subsequently Singapore and Malacca. So these three together makes up the Straits Settlement, and we are going to look at the influence of British in these three states. Subsequently, the second stage of British intervention can be seen in the Malay states, and Malay states is made up of the federated Malay states and unfederated Malay states. So we are going to look at which are the states that fall under federated Malay states and unfederated. And the third stage of intervention is in East Malaysia, okay, where British, okay, interfered in Sabah and Sarawak. So let's look at, these are the stages of British rule. So if you look at, okay, the ones that is in blue, you have Penang, followed by Malacca, and then followed by Singapore. So these three states subsequently forms the Straits Settlement. It's very important for you to know the development, okay, of the Straits Settlement. Now, the second will be the one in yellow is the Federated Malay States that makes up Perak, Selangor, Negeri Sembilan, and Pahang. This is known as the Federated Malay States. And the one in green, which makes up, you have this Kedah, Kelantan, Terengganu, and Johor, makes up the unfederated Malay state. So we'll look at that later, what is the distinction between federated and unfederated. And the third stage, of course, will be Sabah, British influence in Sabah, and Sarawak, which is in East Malaysia. So that's a three stage of British intervention. So let's look at the first stage, which is the Straits Settlement. And the first state, okay, where British made their presence was in Penang. So British obtained formal cessation from the Sultan of Kedah in 1786 in return for protecting the state from Siamese attack. Okay, so Kedah was under the rule of the Sultan of Kedah, and there was attack from Siam. Okay, that's the old name from Thailand. And as a result, okay, British said that, okay, we will protect you from the Siamese attacks, but in return, okay, we will administer and take over Penang. So from 1786 to 1807, British, okay, there was no body of law or fixed law administered, and the legal system was in a state of chaos. So that is when you find that British introduced the Royal Charter of Justice. Okay, the Royal Charter of Justice is akin to a legal instrument. So what happens subsequently? Okay, as a result of the Royal Charter of Justice 1807, British introduced a proper legal system in Penang, and the common law of England, okay, was formally introduced in Penang. And subsequently, Court of Judicature of Prince of Wales Island, okay, was introduced. So a legal system, a court system was introduced in Penang. And various jurisdictions, you had the civil, criminal, as well as religious matters. Okay, so as mentioned, the laws of England, which is the common law and equity, okay, was introduced into the legal system. So there was a little administrative structure put in place, okay, because the courts were established. So you have a governor to rule Penang, you have 3 councillors, and a judge to preside over matters. Okay, so the judge here is known as the Recorder of Prince of Wales Island. So some of the cases that was decided, okay, with this new court system, one of the case that you can look at is the case of Yok Chia Neo and Ong Cheng Neo, okay, where Sir Montague Smith, on behalf of the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, said, in applying the general principles, the applicability of English law to the Strait Settlement, it has been held that statutes relating to matters and exigencies peculiar to the local condition of England and which are not adapted to the circumstances of the colony do not become a part of its law, although the general law of England may be introduced into it. Okay, so as far as possible, okay, they also do respect the local customs and tradition. Okay, so the issue in this case was whether a Chinese can make a device giving property for charity which benefited only himself and his family. Okay, so in this particular case, the Chinese custom was disregarded and the common law principles were applied in deciding the case. Now, other cases that you can look at that was decided under the Court of Judicature Act 1807, look at the case of Kamu and Besset, also the case of in the goods of Abdullah. Okay, these are good cases for you to read up to understand, okay, how the common law had influenced the cases, okay, that were decided by the courts that were put in place by the British. So we will discuss these cases during tutorial. So please read and understand these cases. Now, after Penang, the next state that was ruled by the British is Singapore. Now, Singapore at that point of time was under the control of Johor. Okay, if you look at the geographical position, Johor is at the southern tip of Malaya, which is very close to Singapore. So Singapore was under the control of Johor prior to the presence of British. Now, British at that point of time had a trading post in Singapore, okay, as early as 1819, and they were in control of certain trade and ports in Singapore at that point of time. And since the location of Singapore is said to be very strategic, as you know, that whole Strait Settlement, those area are a very lucrative port at that point of time. Okay, you're looking at the Straits of Malacca, okay, which is a trading post, and Singapore at the tip of Malaya. Okay, you find that it was also thriving, okay, a very busy port. So by 1820, you find that Singapore was earning revenue, and 3 years later, its trade surpassed that of Penang. So it was doing better than Penang as a port. So British manipulated a succession dispute, okay, that was happening in Johor, okay, and subsequently the Sultan of Johor, okay, was appointed as the rightful Sultan, okay, in the dispute, the tussle. But in return, he had to sign a treaty with the British. So in 1824, Singapore's status as a British possession was formalized by two treaties, which is firstly known as the Anglo-Dutch Treaty that was executed in March 1824. Okay, the Dutch withdrew all objections to the British occupation of Singapore. And there was also another treaty with Sultan Hussein and Temenggung Abdul Rahman in August, by which the two owners ceded the island outright to the British in return for increased cash payments and pensions. Okay, so once Singapore was under British rule, okay, the principles of British law was applied, okay, without distinction of race or religion, tribe or nation. So first, okay, British made their presence in Penang, and secondly, okay, they took over Singapore, all right, and subsequently you will find that the third was Malacca. Okay, prior to 1824, okay, the Anglo-Dutch treaty between Dutch and British was executed. So there was like a barter trade where the Dutch took over Indonesia and British took over Malacca. Okay, so now they have made their presence in Penang, they have made their presence in Singapore, and they made their presence in Malacca. So in 1826, all these three states of Penang, Singapore, and Malacca, okay, formed the Straits Settlement. So that's the first stage of British intervention in Malaya. Now, the second Royal Charter of Justice, okay, was signed in 1826. So what happened under the second charter? A new court, the Court of Judicature of Prince of Wales Island for Singapore and Malacca, was introduced. Okay, the first charter, if you see, was only in Penang. The second charter, it was extended. All right. The charter introduced the general law of England as it existed in 1826 into the Strait Settlement, subject to local conditions. Okay, so by 1826, okay, as a result of the Royal Charter of Justice, the Strait Settlement accepted more of English common law into the legal system. So there was only one recorder who remains in Penang and visits Malacca and Singapore twice a year, okay, to resolve any issues, any disputes between, okay, the various people, the community. So the effect of the second Royal Charter of Justice on Singapore and Malacca, okay, is that, as stated by Malkin, okay, R is recorder, okay, that with the introduction of the charter, it supersedes Dutch law, and the law introduced was English law. Okay, so the introduction of the Royal Charter of Justice into the Strait Settlement, okay, had introduced the existing law of England, okay, and had abrogated any law previously in existence. So English law, if you see, okay, to a great extent influence the laws in the Strait Settlement. Now, subsequently, the Third Royal Charter of Justice was executed in 1855. Now, what the Third Royal Charter of Justice did, it did not introduce any new laws into the Strait Settlement. However, the court system was reorganized. An additional recorder was appointed for Singapore, because prior to this, you only had one recorder who was, okay, visiting Penang, Malacca, and Singapore. So they had an additional recorder. The jurisdiction of the Penang recorder was extended to Province Wellesley, which is the old name for Penang. The recorder of Singapore became the Chief Justice of Singapore, while the recorder of Penang became Judge of Penang. Okay, so the name of the recorder is McClausland as recorder and assisted by a registrar. Malacca and Singapore, Maxwell as recorder and assisted by a registrar. So that's the Third Royal Charter of Justice. So you had the first, then you have the second, and you have the third. So you need to know, okay, all the three Royal Charter of Justice and what this Charter of Justice brought about as far as the legal system, okay, the influence on the legal system, shaping the legal system